Hello, and welcome to the Female Founder Friday podcast with me, Lindsay White. I'm passionate about helping female entrepreneurs be great leaders, build high-performing teams, and create inspiring workplace cultures through innovative talent programs and practices. Because when people feel like they belong at work, they deliver their very best and businesses thrive. And the Female Founder Friday podcast is all about connecting with the most incredible female entrepreneurs to talk about their journey to creating their own businesses, the mistakes they've made along the way, and how they view their own leadership. And I'm challenging all of my guests this season to take my leadership style quiz. And at the end of each episode, we're going to dig into their leadership style and how it impacts the way they lead in their life and their business. And if you're interested in learning more about your leadership style and you want some of my top tips to help you lead more effectively, you can take the quiz right now. Just check out the show notes or head over to highvoltageleadership.ca and click on the button on the top of the page that says Take the Quiz. And you can share your results, connect with our guests, and join the conversation over on Instagram by following me, and my handle is at highvoltleadership. My guest on this week's episode is Lara Hodgson. Lara is what I would call a serial entrepreneur. And today, she's the president and co-founder of Now Corp. And this is her third business that she started with her partner, 𝐋𝐚𝐫𝐶 Abrams. But her entrepreneurial journey really started back when she was in grade 3, making beautiful hair accessories for all of her friends. And Lara's had great success as an entrepreneur, but she's also experienced some failures. And today, she's sharing with us the amazing wisdom that she's gained along the way. And we're going to bust some big entrepreneur myths as well. I know you're going to love this episode. Awesome. Lara, welcome to the Female Founder Friday podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to have you. We were just talking before I hit the record button. We both have 16-year-old boys who play lacrosse. We're both out this past weekend cheering, being, raving fan parents. I know my voice is a little craggy today from all the shouting and the yelling and but it's so fun when you meet someone and you connect and you just have so many parallel lines, so much in common. So I'm really glad to have this conversation with you today. It's going to be exciting.
Yes, thanks.
So I'd love to dive in a little bit more to your background, to your journey to becoming a female founder. I think it's an interesting story, isn't it?
It is. In hindsight, I actually started my first company in 3rd grade. And this was in the 1970s. Nobody talked about being an entrepreneur, but all the girls in school were wearing these hair barrettes that had beautiful ribbon hanging from them with beads on them. And I couldn't afford those, but my mother said, well, maybe we could just make them. And so off we went to the craft store and we started making our own. And within a few days, all the girls in school decided that mine looked nicer. And so they wanted some of those. So we kept going back and forth to the craft store, and I started becoming so busy making hair barrettes that I had to start paying my friends and my sister and everyone else to join me. It became an after school activity. And it was funny because I walked into the craft store one day and the woman said, "What are you doing with all of this ribbon? Like, you're here every week." And so I pulled out of my bag an example of the hair barrettes that I was making. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I could sell those for you." And so she started ordering hair barrettes. And I still remember it was October when we walked into the craft store and the woman placed an order for a couple hundred pair of red and black and a couple hundred pair of yellow and black because the big Georgia Tech University football game was coming up. And my mother promptly informed her that our business was closed because I had homework. So my mother killed my first company, and I still remind her of that. But the funny thing is, I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. And even to this day, when people say, what caused you and Stacy to start your first company, we were reluctant entrepreneurs. Now, I am a problem solver for sure. I love impossible problems. I'm like Mikey on the Life commercial.
Yeah.
If you tell me that you're trying to solve something, I immediately start thinking about it. And I won't sleep until I've come up with an idea that you haven't had. And so, as I came through high school, I was not thinking I want to be the boss. I was not thinking I want to have a company. I really just love solving problems. So I went to Georgia Tech to study aerospace engineering. I mean, what do you do if you love impossible problems? You become a rocket scientist. And so I did that, and I excelled at it, and I loved it. And I studied in Japan, and I did all these like, what would you never do things? Literally, when an opportunity would come and I would say, oh, I don't have time for that, my advisor at Georgia Tech would say, when will you ever have the chance to do something you would never do?
Right.
And so that became a recurring question in my life. What would I never do? And my greatest adventures in life have come from asking that question. What would I never do? And so, you know, I went to business school. I started working for other entrepreneurs. I was really good at helping other people build their companies, and I love doing it. And so what finally made me become a female founder is I became a mom. I became pregnant and had my son. And I know at my core that I am a workaholic, because if I'm working on something, I'm all in.
Right.
So it's not a negative workaholic. It's like, oh my gosh, if I'm all in. But I was in my mid-30s. I didn't know if I would have another child. And I thought, I don't want to look back and regret not being a great mom.
Yeah.
And so I left my job running a large organization and decided to start my own company, really, so I could be a great mom. That's why I started a company.
I love that. You know what? I always said that my real job started after 5:00, right? Like my kids always came first.
Always.
And they still do in a lot of ways, although, you know, I have older children. My 16-year-old is the youngest. And so but I do think that for many of us, moving into the mom space really shifts the way we view what's most important. It really does change, doesn't change what we value. It changes how much we value it. Is that maybe the right way to say it?
I think for me, it gives me clarity. I always say that being a mom makes me a better CEO, and being a CEO makes me a better mom. Yeah. And I think before I became a mother, I would often find myself struggling with what to prioritize sometimes, because it's very easy to deprioritize myself. So I was always prioritizing other things. But when I had my son, it was perfect clarity. Like never once did I struggle with someone wants to have a business meeting and my son has a band concert. Like I don't struggle with that for one fraction of a second. I go to the band concert, and you can always have a meeting another time. And so I think becoming a mom just gave me clarity on priorities that I didn't have before. And likewise, I stopped wasting so much time. I mean, before I had my child, I'd love to walk around the office and chit chat with everyone, but all of a sudden you realized, like, yes, I still need to, you know, sort of have the personal side of what I'm doing, but I also don't have time to waste. And so I'm much more efficient.
I love that. I love that. But I think, you know what? I can see the connection. I mean, you talked about the clarity, the connection between the clarity and the efficiency. I've got priorities. I know which order they come in, and my kids, my family come first. My business is important, but that does not mean that it overrides. And I talk a lot about creating work and life blend. Like there is a way to do both, and to do both with passion, to do both with drive, to do both with purpose, but you can't do it all at once.
And I love that you use the word blend, because I don't think I've ever been on a panel with women and not been asked the question about work-life balance. We have a fetish with that question, and we just love to talk about it. And at the end of the day, when people say, can you have work-life balance? My reaction is, yes, you can have it. You don't want it. It sucks.
Yeah.
Because to me, balance is like the seesaw on a playground. And if it's balanced, there are two things we know. Number one, nobody is having any fun because we're just dangling. But number two, everything's average. And I have no desire to be an average mother, an average wife, or an average CEO. So long ago, I stopped trying to balance everything. And instead, I focus on optimizing my life and my personal side, my work and my personal.
Love
So if I'm coming to a board meeting, you better be prepared, because for 2 hours, you have 100% of me. I am not checking my phone. I'm not texting anybody. I'm not doing anything else. But when I leave, I'm doing something else. So it's really about being 100% in the moment.
Yeah.
And what I find is, before I did that, when I tried to quote unquote balance things, I would be at the playground. My son would be like, Mom, watch me. And you would pretend to watch, but you're really texting.
Yes.
And
Yes.
your child knows that you're not really paying attention. And so they're not satisfied and they're still asking for more. Meanwhile, I've spelled every word wrong in my text. So I've done everything, less well, right? But if instead I put the phone down and I give my child my undivided attention, in about 10 minutes, he's done with me. He's like, okay, Mom, I gotta go, right? Like, enough of you. And then I can go actually craft a text that has all of the words spelled correctly and the grammar correct. So I do think as humans, we tend to sort of glorify this idea of multitasking, but the human brain doesn't multitask.
No.
And we need to be more in the moment.
No, it is 100% true. And I think, your visual of the seesaw, I think, is brilliant, because it does, this idea of work-life balance really is this myth that everything has to be perfect, aligned, and perfectly equal. And that is not the reality. Things are not equal. They don't fit into beautiful little boxes so that they can all, right? Like,
right.
Life is messy and everybody needs a piece of us.
Yeah.
And when we can come to a place where, we can really sort through those pieces and figure out what is most important right now and give it that full attention. I love that. I really love that, Laura.
And I also think there's a myth about entrepreneurship and founders that we have got to bust. I think there's several, but one of them is that you will often hear people say that if you want to be a founder, if you want to start a company, you have to give 100% to your business and everything else takes a second seat.
Right.
And the reason we have got to bust that is that well, first of all, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just wrong. Like, I'll be honest, if you're willing to put your children and your family in a second seat for your business, I would never invest in you because you don't make wise choices.
Yeah.
Why would I invest in someone who's willing to leverage the most important thing in their life, which is their family, for a business? Why would I do that?
Well,
it's
not a values alignment, is it? Like, that's
no. And I think that myth is propagated by people who made those poor choices and they want company. They want you to join them.
Or validation.
Well, and I think the reason we have to bust it is that for many founders, particular women and other underrepresented founders, if you hear that that's a requirement of being a founder, you're going to be discouraged from starting a company. And so we're discouraging some of the most high potential founders out there by creating this myth that if you're not going to give up your family, you can't be a founder. And that's just wrong.
It is so wrong. It is so wrong. I think, in fact, when we start and run our businesses because we love our families, I think we get so much more passion and drive and enthusiasm when we flip that script, when we turn that myth inside out. I love that. And it's about your really understanding how your values inform your business.
I mean, people always laugh at me because in addition to running my business, I started a charter school that I chair the board of. I'm room mom. I've been team mom of every sport you can imagine. But you know what I found? If you want to get something done, find the person who's doing that many things, because they're the ones who get things done.
Yeah.
And so this idea that everything else has to take a second seat, we've just got to stop telling people that.
Yeah. No, I agree. We've got to stop telling ourselves that, right? Like, we really, I think we get caught up in some of these myths, some of these preconceived notions, some of these shoulds. Well, I should give up a lot of time with my family to make my business successful. I should work long hours. I should, like all of that stuff. And we have our own mindset work to do, our own values we really need to refocus and reconnect to. Yeah,
I love that, because words are important. And I actually read an article several years ago that you would love. What it talked about is that self-speak that you're talking about, that we tell ourselves. And the example it gave is, how many times do you say to yourself, ugh, I just don't have enough time?
Yeah.
And they said, reword that sentence, because when you say, I don't have enough time, you're the victim in that sentence. It's as if someone has conspired to steal your time. And so what the article suggested is, if you change the words slightly, and instead of saying, I don't have enough time, say, I choose not to have time to do that. If that doesn't sit well with you, then you are not prioritizing correctly. If you can say that and it doesn't feel bad, then you've prioritized correctly. So for myself, I use that as a litmus test. You know, if my son has something going on and I've got 3 other things to do at work, and then I find myself starting to say, oh, I don't have time. I can't say I don't have time, because I chose to allocate my time to something else. And so I'm the subject, not the object.
It's just such a powerful approach. And I like to actually own it, that I am choosing to deprioritize that thing because something else needs that time. I am consciously own it.
Right. And if you can't, then you know you're making the wrong decision and you need to reprioritize, because at the end of the day, when you choose to give your time to one thing, you're by definition not giving it to something else. And it makes it a lot more clear what's important versus what's urgent. Because we all waste a ton of time on urgent things that are not important.
Well, and a lot of the work I do with female founders is really about going back to always, when they say, I don't have time or I can't get organized, what do you really value? What are the 3 top things that you value? How do those things become real in your life? How do you live into those values? And when you go right back to those very basic sort of foundational pieces of who you are, that provides a lot of clarity around what you should and should not be doing and how much of yourself you need to dedicate to those things. Yeah. It's so easy though, isn't it? It's so easy to slide into some of these other pieces. I love this discussion. I think this is absolutely brilliant. I hope everybody's taking notes, because I sure am. I want to ask you, I mean, you know, starting out with hair bows in the 3rd grade, where have you made, and I mean, I use the word mistakes lightly, missteps. Where have you had misses along the way?
Yeah.
Learned from those? Because I think there's a lot of gold in that.
Well, and don't use the word lightly. I mean, I think that we create this self-speak that either says that my goal is to avoid failure, which is not your goal, by the way. I mean, you can try to avoid failure. It'll still come and it'll be epic. But I also think a lot of times we say, oh, failure's okay. And I don't think failure's okay. That makes it excusable. I think failure's awesome. I think that every day you should intentionally try to fail at something and fail fast and fail forward. Because when you can pick yourself up after that and realize that the sun still comes up and the world still keeps going. So everyone at my company right now jokes that they call me Dory from the movie Finding Nemo, not because I'm directionally challenged. I am very good at following directions, but she's always like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And in this world that we've been living in for the last couple of years, you know, a pandemic and then a war and inflation and supply chain. I mean, if you don't have the grit to just keep swimming, entrepreneurship is all about staying alive long enough to get lucky. I mean, that really is what it's about. And so for me, when I think about the things I've done wrong, your podcast isn't long enough for that, because we would be going on for hours. But you know, one of the biggest things that I think I did wrong early on is most founders are naturally optimistic, right? I mean, cynics don't start companies.
No.
And so I can create this sort of energy aura around like this idea, and here we go. And before you know it, people are following you, right? It's like the Pied Piper, and you're like, here's my vision and let's go. And I thought that was a good thing. But what I started to realize is a lot of the people that would sort of glom onto the team, I was looking at their skill sets and not their mindsets. And so I was letting people join the team that on paper had awesome skill sets. It was like the dream team, right? We had the legal skills and the finance skills and the marketing skills and the operations skills. But I quickly learned that mindsets are way more important than skill sets, because I can teach you almost anything I need you to do, but I can't teach you how to think, how to approach a challenge or an obstacle, how to work through success, how to work through challenges. And so the biggest mistakes I've ever made are around people. And that, I told my team this just the other day. There is only one thing that keeps me up at night, and it's not the crazy, complicated financial structure that I'm putting together. I know I will solve that. What keeps me up at night is people stuff. When people aren't getting along, or the team isn't working at its highest level because we're working at, sort of against ourselves. That is the absolute hardest part about scaling a business.
I love that you said that. And I love that you acknowledge that there have been times where it's been a focus on the skills and experience and not about the human being. Who are they? What did they value? What drives them? Right? How did they solve those big, juicy problems? How do they just not even solve them? How do they approach
it?
Challenges. How did they recover from failure? How do they rebuild resilience? These are actually really key factors. And I hear this over and over again from the women that I work with is, well, it's just really hard to find great people. No, actually it's not. You're not looking for the right things in the right places. And that is where the clarity is really crucial.
Well, and I truly believe, typically when you're hiring someone, you're already a little behind the 8 ball, right? Like you're starting to get busy and you're trying to keep up with your client needs. And the easiest person to hire is somebody who reminds you of yourself. Those are really easy to hire, right? You look at resumes and you're like, oh, I see myself in there. This is going to be a great person. The challenge is the easy hires are never the best hires, right? And a lot of times, I think when I started, I kind of did typical interview questions, which get really good to skill sets, but not so much to mindsets. And so now I've shifted. When we start interviewing people, we actually have projects and sort of homework assignments that you do as part of the interview process. So I can see, how do you approach a problem? How do you communicate it? You may be the smartest person on the planet and the best functionally at what you do, but if you can't communicate it in a way that builds the diversity of our company, that respects every person in the company, then your knowledge isn't helpful to me.
No. Laura, if I could reach through the video screen right now, I would give you the biggest hug, because this really is a message that I am trying to bring to female-led businesses, is that you first of all, you can be proactive about finding the right talent for your business, right? Because you're right. A lot of the times it's reactive. You can be proactive. Like, don't kid yourself. You can get out ahead of that. The second thing is that, yes, it is absolutely crucial that you identify not just who you need, but what you need them to be doing and how they are going to be successful. What are the behaviors that they are going to show up in your business with? That is so nuanced, but it is so important. And I love, you just absolutely explained it beautifully.
Well, I think one of the ways you can get ahead of it, people think, well, I can't hire ahead because I don't have the capital for that. But what I have found, and everyone teases me about this, is I will talk to anyone. And I don't judge people. I mean, if you sit next to me on a plane, I hope you didn't want to read a book, because you will talk to me. If you're bagging my groceries, I will be talking to you. And my son to this day is like, oh my God, Mom, you talk to everybody. But what I realized is, first of all, people are fascinating.
Yeah.
And they don't have to have a title that looks like it's impressive. I mean, anyone you meet can be a positive addition to your network in some form or fashion. But what I've also discovered is if you can see people in their natural habitat, that is actually better than any interview you could ever have. So, for example, the other day I drove through Starbucks. This delightful gentleman took my order and was so engaging. Like it stood out to me, right?
Yeah.
Here I am in the morning, I'm in a rush, I'm going to work. He was so delightful that I literally like not only took my coffee and paid him, but I gave him my card and I was like, if you ever want to do anything different, call me, you can join my team. Like I would hire you tomorrow.
I love that.
Because you showed a love of client service at a time when you didn't know anybody was watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is how you find great employees.
That's something you can work with. And you said it before.
Yeah.
I can teach anybody this, like the skills, but I can't teach that.
Right.
I can't, that's something people come with, is the desire to engage on a different level. And so I think you're so right. And you don't have to hire. I mean, they talk about hire slow, fire fast, and that is the truth. You want to have a great process.
Yep.
You are recruiting and hiring talent into your business. That is really crucial.
Sure.
But you can always be thinking about.
You can always be building a pipeline.
Yes. Who's the right fit for us? What do the people in this business do that are really successful? What are the little things that make a difference here? And that's what you can be kind of keeping your eye open for. And your whole team can be keeping their eye open. Like your team are your best recruiters because they know who's going to fit. So empower them to help, right?
Yeah.
So I love it. I think that is such great advice for so many female founders is, just really being really sharp about identifying that wherever your travels take you.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So Laura has done my leadership style quiz. She's a coaching style, which I didn't think was surprising at all. We're going to talk about that. If you haven't had a chance to do the leadership style quiz, the link is in the show notes. You can also find it on the homepage of my website, which is highvoltageleadership.ca. And that quiz only takes a couple minutes, right, Laura? Like I'm not putting anybody through the ringer here, but it'll give you a bit of an insight as to what your leadership style is. And I've got some great tips for each of those styles. So check that out if you haven't done that already. But Laura, when you got that result, that coaching style back, did it surprise you? I don't think it did.
No. And it's interesting. Several years ago, I was speaking at a leadership conference, and because I am an aerospace engineer, I had to actually look up the definition of leadership in the dictionary, just to validate what I thought it was. And you know what? If you haven't looked it up, you should, because at least in the version of Webster's that I read, leadership had it was either 4 or 6 sub-definitions, right? Yeah. And what I thought was fascinating is that half of them were about the leader themselves. So some of the definitions were things like being in charge, leading an effort, so it was about the leader, when the definition of leadership was focused on the leader themselves. Yeah. But what I found fascinating is the other half weren't about the leader at all.
Right.
It was about guiding a person to their goal in life, et cetera. And as I read those definitions, I thought, oh my gosh, I am completely in the second camp. Like what I derive joy in is helping other people exceed their expectations.
Yes.
Because I'm a teacher at heart, right? Like I love taking a group of people that think they can do X and together showing that we can do X times 10.
Yeah.
And so, but that really hit me when I saw the definition of leadership is that part of the reason we all have different leadership styles is we all define leadership differently.
Sure we do.
And my definition of leadership is not the same definition as someone who would have aligned themselves with those first 2 or 3 definitions, which were all about me.
Right.
To me, leadership is about the object that you're leading, not about you as the leader at all.
You know what? I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. Great leaders are 100% invested outwardly, right? They are also very deeply self-reflective.
Right.
They are constantly seeking to understand how they show up and impact others to be better, essentially.
Right.
Is sort of how I would, really boiling it down. So there's this cool give and take, because there's this outward guiding, supporting, coaching, encouraging and empowering others to find their best self, their appropriate path. And then there's this element of self-reflection. How did I show up for those people, or in that moment? That, I think, is the other part of leadership that sometimes falls off at the end. Great leaders are deeply, deeply self-reflective.
No, I think that's right. And I think, as you know, with teenage children, et cetera, my son always laughs. He's like, Mom, everything doesn't have to have a life lesson. I'm like, oh, but it does. I mean, if we watch a movie, there's a life lesson in there somewhere. Right. But one of the things I pointed out to him is that you can think you're a leader. You can have a vision, you can drive direction, but if you turn around and nobody's following you, you're not a leader, right? Exactly. You're just a lone person in the wilderness.
Yeah. Well, and on the other side, you can manage the crap out of the tactical pieces.
Sure.
You can drive process, you can drive goal achievement, you can do all of those things, and you're not actually leading, you're managing.
Right.
Which is, there's moments when that's important too. Right.
Yeah. Now, I'm actually not good at the management part. And believe me, I'm very self-reflective. I'll be the first one to tell you what I'm not good at. I mean, I am very good at setting the direction, mobilizing the team, getting people to overachieve. On the day-to-day sort of management of tasks, that is not my strength. And part of it is because I don't like people to manage me. Right. I believe you manage tasks and you lead people.
Yes.
But I have to often remind my team that, like, look, you guys know that's not my strength. So this is where you guys have to step up, right? Because it's not my strength. So it better be somebody else's here, or else we're missing something on the team. But I think part of it is also admitting what you're really good at and what you're not.
Yeah.
Especially as a founder, because when you start a company out of necessity, you kind of do everything.
Yeah.
But if you can't figure out what you shouldn't be doing, then the company will never scale.
No, you know what? And that is a tricky spot, I think, because so many of us, and I put myself in this group too, Laura, is we're so invested, right? Mm-hmm. Like, these businesses are so important to us. We put a lot of our blood, sweat, and tears into them. And so there is that step in our growth where we can no longer do all of the things. There are too many pieces, too many moving parts, too many spinning plates. Yeah. We can't possibly touch them all and still be effective and not lose our marbles completely. Yes. And that is a difficult and challenging time in a CEO's our own life cycle, but in our business's life cycle. And it is hard to let go. And you're right, it has to be self-reflective. Yeah. Right?
Well, and I've actually developed a tool to figure out what things to let go. Not that it was like officially a tool, but it's what I've done, and I've used it with other folks. So I think most people are good at a lot of things. And when we're young and you're good at something, all the people around you that love you encourage you to do more of it, right? Oh, you're good at throwing a ball. You should throw a ball more. Oh, you're good at math. You should go be an engineer. And what you realize midway through your career is that what you love and what you're good at aren't always the same thing.
No, they're not.
That's important, right? Because, so for example, if you're a list person, this is my tool. So I'm a big to-do list person. In fact, if I do something during the day and it wasn't on the list, I write it on there just so I can cross it out because it's therapeutic. But if you keep to-do lists, hopefully on Monday, your list is one size and by Friday, it's a little bit smaller. It's never done, right? Because you're always adding to it.
Yeah.
But look at your list every Friday for like 4 weeks and see what's left on it. You don't like those things. because if your lunch meeting on Wednesday cancels and you find an hour, you won't do those things. You'll fill it with something you like to do.
Totally.
And so my advice, and I use it for myself, is to look at what's left on Friday. Make sure someone else on your team loves to do those things and never has them on Friday.
Yeah.
And so those are the things I don't like. That's how I know the things that I'm not as great at, because I don't love them. I don't love to do them.
No.
I'm really good at spreadsheets, for example. I'm an aerospace engineer, but I don't like them. They're always there Friday.
No, and I think, you hear a lot of people talk about zone of genius, but I think that there is something to be said for what is the zone of, like, what dislike isn't the right word, but I'm just not passionate about it.
It's kind of that's what I was gonna say. It's like, what drives joy in your life?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If I have an extra hour in my day, even though I have all the spreadsheets that I have to go over, and I'm good at spreadsheets, I will spend time with a client. I'll spend time with a partner. I'll spend time with one of my teammates. I come out of those meetings fired up, right? Yeah. Like, I'm just jazzed. Whereas Amelia, my CFO, if she has an extra hour, she loves to dive into a spreadsheet. She comes out of it totally jazzed.
Right.
That means we're great teammates.
Yeah. Yeah. And back to your, sort of the conversation earlier about finding the right talent. It's really important that you find those people that actually like to do the stuff you don't.
Yeah.
Having a diverse team means having people that have divergent thoughts. They have divergent ways they process information. They have divergent and really interesting skill sets. And as a leader and a founder, you really have to be able to say, I know I need a CFO who is not going to think like me. And sometimes that's going to be tricky. And that's okay, because magic is going to happen right there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Stacy and I recently wrote this book, Level Up. And part of the reason we wrote it was to share with people that we are very different. Mm-hmm. And that's not, people say, how do you overcome the challenge of being different? It's not a challenge. It's our superpower.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's those differences that allow us to level up, to get above a new level of innovation, because we're willing to stop focusing on how we do things and focus more on the goal and be willing to invent a third way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I want to add to that, because I think all of that is brilliant, is being able to embrace that there's going to be conflict. You're not always going to agree. And that actually that is a great thing, not a negative. Like, use that passion and that friction and that energy and that heat that comes out of that to propel things forward. And I think that's what makes great partnerships.
Well, and I'm glad you used the word friction, because as an aerospace engineer, I can tell you that if there's no friction, you're not flying.
Well, there you go.
You're just spinning around, right? You need friction to have direction. Yeah. And so you're so right. I think, we've always challenged our team to be curious first, critical second. So the friction is good. If everyone's agreeing, you should go get a different team. I always challenge my employees. I say, look to your left, look to your right. If both people look like you, move, like physically move.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have people just, creating echo chambers back and forth that agree with you. That friction is how you get to another level of innovation. But you're right. It's messy and it's not comfortable, but we as a society have become way too comfortable, and we have to become comfortable again being uncomfortable.
And that, I mean, honestly, I think that should belong somewhere in the definition of being an entrepreneur and a female founder. Like, you need to know upfront that every day is going to be deeply uncomfortable. Every day is going to be a learning curve. And basically that curve will be straight up a lot of it.
And sometimes down, and it's okay.
Right? Straight down. That is the truth, right?
You're going to go up, you're going to come back down. You're going to go back up, you're going to come back down.
Oh, I love it. Laura, this has been a really fantastic conversation today.
I so enjoyed talking to you.
We've covered a lot of ground, but it's all wonderful stuff. It's wonderful stuff. I could go on for hours, but thank you so much for finding some time to speak with me. We're going to put in the show notes a link to find your book. Level Up. Excited. I'm excited to read it too. And it was such a pleasure having this conversation with you today.
Same here.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. I sure hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did hosting this conversation. And if you did enjoy today's episode, would you do me a favor? Would you give the episode a 5-star review and share it with all of your friends? I would really appreciate that. I've got a goal to impact 1,000 female founders, and with your help, we can really amplify this message. Thanks again for being a part of the show, and don't forget to connect with me and all of my guests on Instagram at High Volt Leadership. We'll see you next Friday.